Taco Bowman felt that he could take anybody's life that he so desired.
He's a real violent guy, probably the most violent international president that the Outlaws ever had. And with violence comes respect.
Good outlaw makes a lot of money.
Drugs, extortion, prostitution, they do anything to make a dime.
Bowman said this is the year that the club is going to be more violent.
2 people were killed and at least 4 others injured in an apparent turf war.
Taco really took the war to the Hells Angels.
Neighbors said they heard an explosion just after 5 o'clock.
They built a bomb full of gas and blew the club up.
That's when Mike Lynn came forward.
I'm sure I'm famous in the outlaw nation because they would love to get a hold of me.
Initially, he brought pictures of the inside of the clubhouse. He identified members and started wearing a recorder.
If they had found him taping a meeting, they probably would have beat him to death.
SWAT teams with their armored vehicles descend on a typically quiet neighborhood. Their target, Harry Bowman.
He cut the head of the snake off. The organization's supposed to die, but it didn't.
The Outlaws are blowing up right now. I mean, he may be sitting in federal prison, but I firmly believe that Taco's still the top dog.
Now on Gangsters, Harry Taco Bowman, the ultimate outlaw. They call it Bike Week. Each year, hundreds of thousands of motorcycles descend on Daytona, Florida for 7 days of sin, chrome, and leather. Since 1991, every outlaw in the land has made the pilgrimage under orders from a supreme leader in the gangland underworld.
Bike Week belongs to the Outlaws, or they think it does, and they all come here. I mean, you couldn't walk down Main Street without seeing Outlaws.
For 17 years, the leader of this pack was one Harry Bowman. They called him Taco. The FBI called him a gangster and put him in their own exclusive club, the 10 Most Wanted list. Harry Taco Bowman, indicted for murder, attempted murder, and violent racketeering acts, including kidnapping, extortion, firebombing, and drug dealing, all on behalf of his outlaw nation.
Motorcycle clubs are no longer just about leather jackets, long hair, and bar fights. Police say many of these gangs have grown into organized crime syndicates, the mob on wheels.
It's a mobster organization. You got your foot soldiers, you got your lieutenants, your captains, and on up to the big boss, Taco.
One outlaw biker went rogue and risked his life to put Harry Bowman behind bars. Mike Lynn agreed to speak upon condition of anonymity. Now he's the wanted man by those he used to call brothers.
The Outlaws Motorcycle Gang, which they are a gang, they're not a club. The Kiwanis are a club. The Outlaws are a gang. They like to put out that it's biking and brotherhood. In reality, there's no brotherhood at all. It's about money. It's about crime. It's about violence.
Brotherhood thing, I don't know. If they had found him taping a meeting, they probably would have beat him to death.
Mike Lynn fit the brotherhood to a T when he got his patch in 1993. A former Ku Klux Klan member and a drug dealer. He was white, he owned a bike, and he knew how to earn.
Intimidation, extortion, run women, prostitution.
anything else that they can put their claws into that's going to earn $1. That's what they're about.
Membership in this gang is all about proving yourself.
With every outlaw motorcycle gang, you're going to have some kind of a hang-around period. You know, coming in off the street's hard to do. Everybody's so paranoid about law enforcement infiltration.
Upon invitation, the hang-arounds become probationary members.
You wear a probationary patch. It says probationary outlaw. During the probationary period, you're going to do very menial tasks.
They keep these guys up and running. They might have you up 48 to 72 hours straight, getting beers for members, you know, serving food, doing whatever full patch members ask you to do.
That's when you basically become a slave. Anything they say you got to do it, they're beck and call 24 hours a day.
One of Mike Lynn's first orders as a probate was to guard the ultimate outlaw, President Bowman, during Bike Week.
He's like, hey, I got to go teach you how to be an outlaw. You can't be an outlaw sitting in this clubhouse all the time. So we went out to the Tapas bar. Within 5 minutes, Taco picked up the best-looking girl in there. Had to close off the bathroom, not let all the regular civilians go in there when Taco was in there snorting. He was a real happy guy most of the time when you seen him. But late at night, when the drugs started getting to him, he'd get kind of cranky. I knew enough just to stay away from him.
During Bike Week in 1992, Taco ordered a kidnapping. The man was a friend of an outlaw who punched a member. Once captured, he was thrown off the balcony of his third-floor hotel room. Beyond his reputation and his impulsive nature and drug habit, Mike Lynn immediately noticed another glaring difference between the leader and the pack.
When you would look at Taco, he had this weird little shaved mustache. He looked like a Mexican. If you'd seen him stand between 20 Mexicans, you wouldn't have been able to tell him apart.
People thought he looked Hispanic or Mexican or whatever and called him Taco.
Really, when you deal with nicknames with bikers, a lot of times it's just dumb things.
From what he had told me one time when he first started out, he was a stinking Mexican, and then he graduated to being a beaner, and then he was the boss, and he's just Taco. But the funny part is he's a white guy. Right in the bylaws, it says you have to be a white male. He was white.
He's the boss, so they must have voted him in. The club didn't have a problem with it. They all loved him.
By the time he targeted Daytona and Bike Week, his record preceded him. Taco had tangled with the mafia. He'd said no to the federal government. He'd made an example out of a suspected snitch and vowed to go toe-to-toe against the Outlaws' most hated rivals, the Hells Angels.
He controls an organization that has hundreds of members that are, on his say-so, will go out and do violent things. If they were going to assault members of another gang, like they did, and take a war wagon and 100 members with guns, you had to get permission from Harry Bowman before you did that, and he gave it.
The bombings, the murders, the extortions, the kidnappings, all came from Taco, and everything always pointed to the top.
Each body discovered just meant another patch on the jacket for an outlaw in South Florida.
2 lightning bolts meant they murdered somebody. They killed somebody.
Mike Lynn never proved himself worthy of lightning bolts. He narrowly escaped his time with Taco and the Outlaw Motorcycle Club with his life.
Mike Lynn, within a very short period of time, began wearing a recorder inside of the clubhouse, and we started recording criminal activity.
Mike was pretty brazen. One time he said that he heard the tape click. Then one of the members followed him to the bathroom.
I just started reaching for my pistol because I knew he'd see me. I'm famous in the Outlaw Nation because they would love to get a hold of me. I'm #1 on their hit list.
In 1993, Mike Lynn was sworn to protect the boss, Harry Taco Bowman, international president of the Outlaws Motorcycle Club, a responsibility that came with membership.
Any outlaw out there had to protect the boss because every Hell's Angel, they would love to have this patch sitting on a wall somewhere.
Since 1979, there have been at least 15 murders connected to biker gang violence.
The Hells Angels are the enemy of the Outlaws Motorcycle Club. That's been a long-standing war between those two clubs.
A lot of the members themselves don't even know why the hatred exists. You can go ask a Hells Angel or an outlaw, hey, why do you hate these guys? They can't tell you.
It's a war over territory and prestige. A schoolyard fight between bullies taken to the extreme.
Everyone in law enforcement would tell you that the #1 outlaw motorcycle gang in the country is without a doubt the Hells Angels. In the world, for that matter.
If you wanted to match up just man for man, I think the Outlaws are probably a more violent motorcycle gang than the Hells Angels. The Hells Angels are so much more sophisticated, wealthier, and the way the Outlaws do business, I think, is probably one of their greatest hindrances to being more successful.
The man in charge of outlaw business for 17 years took it upon himself to lift his club to another level of menace. He wanted the very mention of his club to evoke the same kind of response his rival president, Sonny Barger, enjoyed with the Hells Angels.
Taco Bowman was probably more ruthless than Sonny Barger. He showed no remorse. It meant nothing to him to take a life.
Even one of his own. An outlaw named Donald Fogg turned up face down in the snow near his own clubhouse in Gary, Indiana. Big Don had been an enforcer on national runs.
Bowman thought Fogg was a snitch, was a cooperator with law enforcement. Up north, he was shot in the back of the head a couple times.
Fogg's truck was still running. Police say he was killed by someone he knew.
He was buried with full outlaw honors, which means all the members of the club that are not in jail or in a hospital go to his funeral.
Bowman ordered his killing, then watched his brothers put him in the ground.
He felt that he could serve as God, and as God, he could take anybody's life that he so desired.
Mike Lynn put his life on the line to take down not just a man, but a gang of criminals with a long history of violence.
The Outlaws Motorcycle Gang like to say that they evolved out of the McCook Outlaws, which were established in 1935 in McCook, Illinois, at a place called Matilda's Bar over off Route 66.
The guys, they kind of filled me in on a lot of the history stuff that I didn't know about. Back then, we were about friendship, brotherhood, women, partying, the good stuff, you know.
The McCook Outlaws were more of a mom-and-pop outfit. Men and women both wore patches. Not really a known criminal element to them. So I think to say that they are, direct descendants of that group, it's a little shaky. I think every outlaw motorcycle gang wants to be the oldest, so they're going to try to predate Hollister.
Hollister refers to a 1947 Independence Day party in Central California that got out of control and created a movement.
The American Motorcycle Association was hosting a gypsy tour. What ends up happening out of that is you get a member of one of the groups that gets arrested for probably what we would equate to being drunk and disorderly. You got a 7-man police element working Hollister. Riot kind of breaks out.
California Highway Patrol put down the unrest, and the AMA put out a press release to quell public outrage.
They say 99% of the bikers present at Hollister are law-abiding citizens. You know, the 1% caused all the problems.
Ultimately, the Hells Angels evolved out of Hollister.
The Outlaws say, hey, we came on the scene in 1935, so I think it gives them that edge, or at least they feel like they've got that leg up, that, hey, we've been around longer than you, so we're a superior outfit.
The modern-day Outlaws emerged on the south side of Chicago after the Second World War. 10 years after Hollister, they found their identity on the silver screen. The Wild One with Marlon Brando as the leader of the Black Rebel Motorcycle Club made a lasting impression. The Outlaws rebranded themselves, stealing the logo and the attitude.
It's a badge of honor. They're like, hey, we like this. We like being considered the bad guys, and they ran with it.
While the Hells Angels were the first 1% club, the Outlaws were the first east of the Mississippi. Harry Joseph Bowman came from the tiny town of Marysville, Michigan. Population 9,000 and change. His early life is a mystery. Taco made a name for himself in Detroit, where the Outlaws specialized in managing strippers and collecting debts for the mob.
Members of organized crime in Detroit had targeted Taco and, in fact, made some threats that Taco perhaps needed to be eliminated.
I remember when they indicted several mafia bosses up in the Detroit area, that there was a conversation that there'd been a hit out for Taco. He'd been interfering in some illegal gambling operations of some sort in Detroit.
The FBI agents went out and approached Taco, in part to solicit his cooperation.
He did not cooperate with the government. Instead, he started riding with bodyguards and staking his claim to one of the largest motorcycle rallies in the land.
Well, the reason Daytona Beach is so important to the Outlaws is the Hells Angels really control the Sturgis Rally. The same way with Laconia. That's kind of been the Hells Angels rally, too.
There were no Hells Angels chapters in Florida.
Bike Week is arguably the biggest motorcycle rally in the world. If Harry Bowman was going to put his gang on equal footing with the Hells Angels, he needed his Outlaws to take over Daytona.
Taco really took the war to the Hells Angels. You know, we're going to go after these guys. We're going to go toe-to-toe with them. And a lot of these guys said, yeah, this is what we want. This is what we wait for. Is someone to stand up, lead us, someone that'll go into battle with us.
Daytona's Bike Week was always neutral ground. Anybody and everybody could come here and not have to worry about it. And then in 90, the Outlaws established a chapter here and started calling Daytona their own. And, of course, the other clubs didn't like that.
Taco Bowman could care less. The international president of the Outlaws Motorcycle Club had a master plan for his minions. Incite violence, claim territory, challenge the supremacy of the most famous motorcycle club in the world, the Hells Angels. They had Sturgis. He wanted Bike Week.
I'd ask him point blank, what are you doing down here? And he'd say, none of your effing business or whatever. I'd say, nice to see you, Taco, and walk away, you know. But he knew I was watching them. Keeping tabs on them was my primary responsibility.
They moved into Daytona with a clubhouse right off Main Street on the 50th anniversary of Bike Week.
There were 3 main bars at that time. We just passed Froggy's, Dirty Harry's is right here, and then, of course, the infamous Boot Hill Saloon right down the road here. The early stages, they tried to extort these bar owners. They were beating up patrons. They tried to intimidate the owner of the Boot Hill to giving him cut on his, T-shirts, hats, stuff that he was selling.
The power play garnered the Outlaws federal recognition. A young FBI agent named Tim Donovan was assigned to the case.
When we started the investigation, it was really just me and Mickey Powers from Daytona Beach Police Department.
He won't admit it, but I think I taught him everything he knows about bikers. Tell him I said that.
We had one wall in our office entirely covered in pictures. Every member of the Outlaws Motorcycle Club that came into Daytona, we tried to identify. We would run into many of these people over and over again.
During Bike Week, you could remember it was a mandatory run, so all outlaws had to come here. You saw hundreds of them, literally. Bikes line the street, outlaws all over. They'd be walking down the streets, their old ladies.
The other 51 weeks of the year, the case was much more manageable.
We had 7 members in the Daytona Beach chapter when we started the investigation. Within the state of Florida, there were probably about 35 members.
Mike Lynn became an outlaw, just as Taco Bowman raised the stakes in South Florida for his motorcycle club.
In January of 1993, during their New Year's Eve party, Bowman made what was later known as a Rotner speech, where he stood up and in front of all the members said that this is the year that the club is going to be Rotner. It's going to be more violent, it's going to take care of business, it's going to do more against their rivals than they ever had before.
Basically, you know, he told them he wanted them to be, you know, the dirtiest, nastiest, rottenest outlaw motorcycle gang in the world. But more importantly, he wanted them to live up to the name Outlaws.
I had just got my probate patch that night. That's one of the things, as soon as you get your probate patch, you got to go around all the members and introduce yourself. You know, hi, I'm Mike, probate from Daytona Beach, and met Taco that night.
6 months later, Mike Lynn would be working undercover to put Bowman away for life.
At the 4th of July party, they called me down. I was on guard duty. They started trying to yank my patch off my back, my probate patch. You know, we went at it, and they said, well, if you want to keep that, you want to trade it for this? And they handed me the Outlaw patch. We got teetotaling, drunk, and I beat the heck out of a president from another bike club. So it was real fun for my first night.
The following week, he went to church for the first time.
A church meeting was your weekly meeting. You got to go in there and be with the big boys and see what was going on behind them closed doors that she's been staring at for all them months.
You don't really have an understanding of the criminal activity that the club is involved in until you actually become a full-fledged member, then are invited to church.
A lot of these guys kind of buy into it, and then the next thing you know, they realize, wow, I thought I was joining a motorcycle club. What am I involved in?
What Mike Lynn discovered inside these walls would eventually break down the brotherhood.
First couple weeks, you know, we started talking about doing all this surveillance on the Warlocks.
The Warlocks had come into South Florida with an allegiance to the Outlaws' sworn enemies.
They were selling drugs on behalf of the Hells Angels in Florida.
Taco had made it clear that Florida was now outlaw territory.
They had the word Florida written on the bottom of their patch, and the Outlaws' mentality was you can't have the full word, you can abbreviate it, but the full word belonged to us. It's just a word. If they'd come in and stole somebody's old lady or ripped off one of the brothers or drug deal or something like that, yeah, then you could retaliate. You'd have a reason. But just for a little word in Florida, it's not worth killing everybody.
On October 18th of 1994, members of the Daytona Beach chapter of the Outlaws Motorcycle Club went down to Brevard County. They built a bomb out of 5-gallon jerry can full of gas with a PVC pipe filled with black powder. Threw it through a window of the club and blew the club up.
The clubhouse burned to the ground, but no one was hurt.
I did a lot of soul searching, and finally I contacted the FBI. They didn't believe who I was.
Mike Lynn had only been a member for 3.5 months.
I remember the first conversation that I had with Mike Lynn. He said, I'm not going to go to jail for these guys. You know, you're not going to believe the kind of criminal activity that these people are engaged in. They're going to kill somebody. Somebody's going to get hurt.
What neither man knew at the time is that Taco Bowman had already ordered hits, had already killed a warlock in the name of his club.
He's a real violent guy, probably the most violent international president that they ever had. And with violence comes respect. And he definitely was a guy that would go in and get his hands dirty.
On the final night of 1993, Harry Taco Bowman addressed his outlaw nation after a national run and implored his brothers to become, in his words, more rottener. In 1994, Daytona, Florida became the front line in what he hoped would become a global campaign.
Neighbors said they heard an explosion just after 5 o'clock. Police believe it was an attack by a rival motorcycle gang in a battle over turf.
In October of 94, the Daytona Outlaws firebombed the clubhouse of a rival gang with ties to the Hells Angels.
Things just escalated from there. November 28th of 94, members went up to Chicago and blew up the Hells Henchmen clubhouse. We learned shortly after that they had built another bomb and they were carrying this bomb around South Florida.
The FBI learned of the threat against the president of the Warlocks because they had a man on the inside of the Outlaws' secret society.
I was fed up with it, and I wasn't going to take it anymore and do whatever I have to do to get out of there.
Mike started having second thoughts. He told me, look, I joined the club to ride motorcycles. I was into the brotherhood, but he says, when they start killing other people or trying, he says, no, that ain't me.
Mike Lynn walked into an FBI office building in Daytona, Florida in 1994.
It's a kind of spooky feeling, because if anybody'd seen me walking out of the FBI office, I'd have really been in some trouble.
I knew who Mike Lynn was. I didn't, however, know how credible the information would be. Initially, he brought pictures of the inside of the clubhouse. He identified members, identified associates. And within a very short period, started wearing a recorder.
If they had found him taping a meeting, they probably would have beat him to death.
We had a set of rules we were supposed to abide by that we never did. Back then, we had beepers, and we were all supposed to turn them off and leave them outside, which nobody ever done. We had an electronic device for scanning for any kind of transceivers. Basically, if they'd have done their own rules, they would have caught me right off the bat, but it never happened.
It was a micro cassette recorder, and he had put it in his vest or his pocket.
I had a big biker wallet with the end split open and their mic stuck up through the slit.
For 3 months, Mike Lynn went to church wearing a wire.
The tapes were like 45 minutes, little micro mini cassettes, and I'd excuse myself, go into the restroom and flip that little sucker over real quick.
He acted like he was scratching his or something and flipped the tape over and kept the recording.
One day I was doing that, and I just flipped it over, and I stuck a bunch of $100 bills over the recorder. I just got it set back in there, and DK is face-to-face with me.
Stephen D.K. LeMunyon, the chapter president, had followed him into the bathroom.
Right then, I just started reaching for my pistol because I knew he'd see me. Luckily, it was the old gentleman's rule. He didn't look down. So that saved me.
I don't think one of the things that people appreciate is how difficult it is to be associated with a group like this.
There's a lot of stuff on the tapes. We're talking club business about killing this guy and blowing this guy up, running them over on their motorcycles, and dope deals and extortion.
The turning point in the investigation came in December 1994, in the aftermath of a national confrontation with the Outlaws' natural enemy.
2 people were killed and at least 4 others injured in an apparent turf war between rival motorcycle gangs near Buffalo, New York.
There was a gunfight up in, I believe it was Lancaster, New York.
2 outlaws and 2 angels were killed.
There was a newspaper clipping of a 5th chapter member hugging a Hell's Angel, and 5th chapter guys that were recovering alcoholics and drug addicts are trying to get their life together. They ride motorcycles. They got a common unity with brotherhood for helping each other stay sober. These guys have no affiliation with the 1%er clubs.
Taco Bowman sees a newspaper article where one of the members of this motorcycle gang was hugging a Hell's Angel. So he told his subordinates to set a trap for them. They invited him to a party.
Right after that, we had a meeting with the 5th chapter guys, and we just beat the heck out of them 4 guys and stole everything they had.
They beat them senseless, took their patches off, and told them that if they ever saw them in Florida, that they would kill these individuals. They actually took the president of that motorcycle group, broke his legs. He made it out to the road and then just collapsed.
Anything like that has to get approval from up top. You don't just go out and do something on your own, because there's some consequences on it. You might have started a war that we'd had with another club that you shouldn't have done, you know.
It was decided to take them down right then, right there.
When the bus went down, I went out, opened the doors for the FBI, and they let me in first in handcuffs and displayed me like I was a convict, just like them. They went to jail, and I went to a nice hotel room out in the airport.
That morning, the Brotherhood began to crumble, even though Harry Taco Bowman was nowhere to be found.
We put together a racketeering indictment against about 22 members of the Outlaws.
RICO, the Racketeering Influence and Corrupt Organizations Act, was passed in 1970.
The RICO Act allows the government to go after criminal enterprises and charge the leaders with crimes they order, as well as commit. It was introduced as a weapon to prosecute the mob.
Prosecutors get 2 hammers out of this. They get to come in and they make a motion before the trial to seize assets. We're going to strip you of all your money. You're not going to be able to afford an attorney. And when we convict you, you're going to do so much time you'll never see daylight again. That scares some people into cooperating.
Before the trial even began, Daytona's chapter president joined Mike Lynn, testifying for the prosecution.
Once that initial one who cooperated, they started looking over their shoulder, like, who's next?
It had a domino effect.
Each indictment led to cooperation from another outlaw.
Brotherhood became a foreign word to them.
You see a lot of the old-timers, the more hardcore members, guys that have been in 20, 25 years, and typically those are the guys that won't cooperate with law enforcement. Modern day, it's the me generation. Everybody's out for themselves. A lot of these guys don't have any concept of what they're going to be doing 5 minutes from now, let alone 5 years.
The guys that rolled, they got reduced sentences for their cooperation, which I don't believe was right, because they murdered a fellow outlaw and kind of got off scot-free on it. Jimmy the Pimp, they didn't like him. They killed him. You know, they went after Big Duck to kill him.
Nobody's ever promised anything up front. Bowman was always in our minds.
By 1997, they had enough evidence and testimony to go after the ultimate outlaw. In March of 1998, Taco Bowman joined a new club, the FBI Top 10 Most Wanted list. In 1997, Harry Taco Bowman was indicted in Tampa, Florida on murder and racketeering charges.
Harry Joseph Bowman, international president of the Outlaws Motorcycle Club, was wanted for murders, attempted murders, narcotics distribution, bombings, extortion, and other acts of violence.
But the U.S. government failed to capture the most famous outlaw in the land.
There were leads everywhere, and everybody was looking for Taco. We had no idea where he went.
In his tenure as president, Bowman created a global network of possible hiding places.
Taco was a big influence in expanding the Outlaws. They're in Thailand, they're in Malaysia, they're in Japan.
Right away, people are thinking England, Germany, any of the European chapters. Oh, did he go to Canada? Is he hiding in Canada with the Outlaws there?
We had stuff going on in Europe, Australia, and he could have went over there and disappeared and not been found for a long time.
He was hiding in plain sight.
In early June, I received a call from the Sterling Heights, Michigan Police Department. They had just received a tip. The FBI ultimately arrested Taco a couple days later.
Even when he was in Florida, his family had always been in Michigan. Just a few miles from his old stomping grounds in Detroit, Bowman was arrested driving a Cadillac with armored plating.
Around 7 o'clock, SWAT teams with their armored vehicles descend on a typically quiet neighborhood. Their target, Harry Bowman.
You know, he kind of was a suburbs guy, kids in private school, the whole 9 yards. And I think if a lot of people just kind of looked at him, he kind of blended into the scenery, so to speak.
He was charged with a racketeering indictment out of Tampa, Florida. He was then transported down here through the U.S. Marshal Service.
The Outlaws were not the first motorcycle club to be brought up on racketeering charges.
In '79, the big RICO case is brought against the Hells Angels.
That kind of went disastrous. The Angels tried to put on the appearance that everybody kind of makes their own decisions in-house and, you know, okay, just because Cleveland's doing this doesn't mean Chicago's doing the same thing. In reality, we know that not to be true, but that does insulate them from RICO charges and things like that.
Sonny Barcher. And the Angels beat the case.
Now, it was the ultimate outlaw's turn to match his rival in the trial for his life. The prosecution's case rested in part on eyewitness testimony from those who knew Bowman the best.
Well, the witnesses you end up using are the kind of people we used here. Former members of the club, people with lots of baggage, people who admit they've committed serious crimes. So the defense in these cases is very consistent. Simply beat up the witnesses who were easy to beat up.
I testified in this trial. He's sitting at the table right in front of me, giving me the nasty look, and that was it. God forgives, outlaws don't.
Mike Lynn wasn't alone. Many of the guys he helped bust ended up cooperating with the government against their president.
Mike Lynn heard him initially, but there were so many people cooperating. Mike Lynn became an afterthought. That's when they're like, holy cow, look at this. We're losing control here. All these brothers are cooperating with law enforcement.
The most damning witness was not a biker, but a young woman named Wendy Chafin. Her father had been the president of the Warlocks in Central Florida.
I'm going to take a second to tell you about why Chafin was murdered. Back in the 1980s, members of the Hells Angels were indicted in Kentucky. I believe it was Louisville.
It was 1988. The Hells Angels were charged with transporting firearms and explosives en route to an attack on the Outlaws. The ensuing trial brought the two sides together.
These two clubs are at war with one another, but they set that down because there's always something that they're both more concerned with than each other. That's law enforcement.
Bowman met with the Hells Angels to work out safe routes for both sides to the courthouse. Neither club could afford a confrontation under the microscope of a judge and jury.
At the end of this meeting, the leader of the Hells Angels said to Bowman, "Can you tell me why Some guy named Raymond Chafin or Bear Chafin keeps writing me from Florida saying he wants to patch his motorcycle club over to the Hells Angels. Making a statement like that to Bowman was like his death warrant.
In 1991, a Daytona Beach outlaw probate, nicknamed Dirt, earned his lightning bolts by killing Chafin.
Mr. Chafin died on the floor of his garage, fatally shot in the head. His daughter rode her bike home from school that day. The person that was testifying was probably 20, 21, 22 years old. When she started to talk about it, you could see she was reliving it as a child.
Her testimony was extraordinarily compelling. How she found her father, how she tried to keep the body warm.
She didn't realize that he was dead, but realized that he was in distress. She pulled a blanket out. She put the blanket over him, and then she got underneath there to keep her daddy warm.
I don't think there was a dry eye in the place. I mean, it was just very emotional testimony.
When she was finished, I think I went back to the table and told the other people, he's done. This is over.
Guilty of 8 counts of racketeering. He now resides in a federal prison near Orlando, just a 90-minute ride from Daytona Beach. But that's a stretch of road Taco Bowman will never see again. He's serving 2 life sentences with no chance for parole.
I think the final tally was 42 outlaws we put in prison.
You cut the head of the snake off, the organization's supposed to die, but it didn't.
The Outlaws are blowing up right now. They're spreading out a lot internationally, and I firmly believe that Taco still gets his 2 cents in. I mean, he may be sitting in Coleman in federal prison, but I think a lot of the stuff that's going on that he can take responsibility for.
The man who helped put the ultimate outlaw behind bars for life is in a prison of his own.
I'm number 1 on their hit list. You know, I'm sure I'm famous in the Outlaw Nation because they would love to get a hold of me.
And I think it's something that Mike Glenn thinks about every single day. I think Mike is always looking over his shoulder and will look over his shoulder for the rest of his life.
One man he won't have to worry about seeing is Harry Taco Bowman.